Imagine the night you hear a ghostly whistle slicing through a blanket of fog, the kind of sound that makes your coffee tremble and your cat stare at the empty tracks like it just witnessed a paranormal episode of Stranger Things. Hey guys, before we wander down this rust-caked memory lane, smash that like button if you love a good haunted history vibe, and drop a comment telling us the creepiest train sound you've ever heard. Now, dim the lights, pull a sweater over your shoulders, and let the faint scent of oil-soaked timber and wet moss creep into the room like a slow-moving trailer park gossip. You step onto cracked cobblestones, feel the chill of the old village square pulse under your boots, and hear the forgotten steam train murmur. All aboard, if you're brave enough, as if it's auditioning for a vintage horror remake. It's the same feeling you get when your Wi-Fi drops during a binge-watch marathon. Frustrating, oddly nostalgic, and a little bit absurd that something so massive can be rendered mute by a single rusted valve. So tell me, would you hop on that rattling carriage for one last ride? Or would you stay glued to your smartphone, scrolling past history like it's just another Instagram story? When that final whistle blew and Leela returned home, her heart thudded with excitement, a wild drum in the symphony of her life. She flung open the door, spilling forth tales of the incredible sights she had seen, the dragonfly-winged valleys and the mustard-colored sunsets, as if each word held all the magic of her journey. Her mother's smile, once a mere crescent moon, bloomed into a full sun, illuminating the room with understanding. So, you really did go far and wide, she grinned, leaning against the kitchen counter, a cup of cooling coffee in hand, like a steadfast lighthouse steering her daughter through the unpredictable tides of dreams. They shared laughter that bubbled up like a fizzy soda pop as they wove a tapestry of Leela's newly discovered world into the fabric of their familiar lives. As the train rattled closer, the earth beneath Elderville seemed to vibrate with anticipation, stirring up dust motes that danced in the sunlight like tiny fairies on a mission. Tom, the steadfast blacksmith, stood in his forge, the heat licking at his skin as he pondered the impending change. What's left of the good old days, he grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow. To him, there was nothing romantic about trains. They were ironclad giants that threatened his livelihood. Imagining the day when people would prefer to hop on a train rather than take a leisurely stroll to his shop filled him with dread. He could almost hear the sports announcer's voice in his head, declaring, "And in this corner, the iron horse versus tradition." Spoiler alert, tradition usually loses. In a land where green meadows kissed the edges of fierce mountains, the great divide snaked like a stubborn river, separating two kingdoms with philosophies as contrasting as night and day. On one side lay valor, a realm draped in banners of bravery, where knights polished their armor until they shone brighter than 1,000 suns, and rulers ruled with a justice that would make Solomon proud, or at least rank him a close second. On the other side, treachery thrived in shadows, where cunning was considered a badge of honor, and loyalty meant little more than a competitive sport. If there were a wizard or witch floating overhead, they might chuckle at the absurdity of it all, watching how the ever-scheming folks of treachery always seemed to play chess, while everyone else was stuck on checkers. In short, you could smell the valor in one kingdom and the deceit in the other, salty oceans of loyalty running alongside rivers of bloodless betrayal. A real medieval potluck gone awry. Enter Prince Alaric, the embodiment of valor himself, tall, dark, and handsomer than a well-fitting pair of designer trousers. With a heart steeled by the weight of a crown that sat proudly on his head, he strode across the sun-drenched lands of valor like a warrior poet, his sword always thirsty for the thrill of battle, and his heart singing a ballad of loyalty. Every villager welcomed him with cheerful shouts, offering up fresh-baked bread infused with garlic, a smell so divine it could lead an army to victory, or at least fuel a raucous feast afterwards. Alaric often pondered his kingdom's fate, dreaming of peace more than glory, and that was when his mind turned toward the looming border, thick with tension like a summer storm. Little did he know, Lady Seraphine was not far away, an equally captivating figure ready to twist fate into knots with her sharp wit and icy blue gaze. In the kingdom of treachery, howling winds whistled through narrow streets, carrying whispers of plots and schemes like pigeons distributing breadcrumbs of intrigue. Lady Seraphine moved gracefully through this world of chicanery, her mane of dark hair cascading behind her like a shadow seeking mischief. No one ever dared ask their lady why she thrived amid the rot and decay, because they were too busy sensing that she was plotting something truly epic, like throwing a medieval rave for campus misfits, but with a dagger hidden under her cloak. Cunning as a fox wearing a top hat, she could outsmart a snake at a game of charades, and every venture of hers walked the fine line between grace and guile. Her heart, however, ached beneath the masks she wore, trapped in her family's treacherous legacy like a hamster on a wheel that just wouldn't stop spinning. As political tensions swelled like an overripe pumpkin on the cusp of bursting, the tension around the shared border escalated to the point where even the birds stopped chirping. Alaric and Seraphine's paths would soon converge, an ironic twist of fate destined to be written in the annals of history, like Shakespeare's characters that couldn't decide whether to kiss or kill. When the ancient prophecy, foretold by a cryptic oracle known for their awful puns, resurfaced, The two young nobles found their destinies entangled like vines, creeping over a forgotten wall. It spoke of unity, shared fates, and the power of two individuals to reshape their divided world. However, that warm, fuzzy feeling of unity was quickly overshadowed by heartbreak, betrayal, and the juicy gossip sure to arise when royalty meddles with treachery. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, both Alaric and Seraphine unknowingly prepared for their fateful encounter, a meeting that would unleash a cacophony of emotions from joyous reunion to heart-wrenching betrayal. Steel clashed against deceit, each step closer filling the air with tension thicker than a dragon's belly after a hearty meal. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was an undeniable electricity that promised more than what either kingdom might expect, a spark that might either bless their realms with salvation or drag them into the abyss. Each of them stood on the precipice of decision like hesitant tightrope walkers at a carnival of fate, wondering if they had the strength to leap into the unknown together. Would they bind their kingdoms in hopes of creating a new legacy? Or would old grudges and the enticing scent of treachery prove too intoxicating to resist? The air crackled with tension as Alaric tightened the reins of his steed, his heart racing like a drumbeat in a war march. It wasn't just any horse he rode. It was the fastest in valor, renowned throughout the realm for its speed and stubbornness, much like Alaric himself. As he approached the towering granite walls of Treachery's castle, a foreboding chill crept into his bones. Spires pierced the overcast sky like daggers, and the distant echoes of clanging metal and shouting guards hinted at chaos lurking beneath the majestic facade. He could almost smell the tang of rust and sweat, an inviting aroma for a man on a peace mission. If one were to have a really odd understanding of welcoming scents, with a firm resolve, Alaric strode past the heavy iron gates, feeling the eyes of guards upon him like hawks sizing up a mouse. He had come not to wage war, but to parley, hoping that reason might bind the throbbing hearts of both kingdoms. Yet, as he ventured deeper into the stone labyrinth of the castle, the whispers grew louder, nefarious murmurings that wrapped around him like thick fog, and they all pointed to one shadowy figure. Duke Malgrave. This man was no ordinary foe. His cunning was reputed to rival the most devious villains of the grandest sagas. Alaric recalled his mother's warnings. Keep your sword close and your enemies closer. A lesson he had to remind himself of in moments of perilous irony. Emerging into the grand hall, Alaric was met with the sight of feasts laid out, starkly contrasting the tension threading through the air. The table was a cornucopia of delights, roasted meats, spiced wines, and bread warm enough to melt butter from across the room. Yet none of it sufficed to sate his growing unease. It was then that he spotted Seraphine, her presence radiating an elegance that could warm the coldest of winters. She entered like a character out of a romantic ballad, but her gaze betrayed an inner tempest, a battle of desire and duty that churned within her like a stormy sea. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown to a dramatic reveal. And just like in the worst superhero flicks, the fate of the world rested precariously on a single decision. The air thickened as Alaric and Seraphine exchanged glances, electric, charged, and filled with unspoken words. Laughter echoed from the feast, but it felt like a cruel joke played at the edge of calamity. Malgrave's sinister laugh drifted over the hall like an unwelcome banshee, sending shivers down Alaric's spine. It turned out that this grand banquet was more than mere diplomacy. It was the very stage upon which treachery would unfold. The revelation hit him like a cold slap. Malgrave plotted to use the dinner's camaraderie to ignite a war that would engulf not just valor and treachery, but the lands beyond, like the worst season finale of a soap opera where everyone betrays everyone else in the most ludicrous ways possible. Seraphine's conflict was palpable, akin to watching a beloved superhero decide between saving humanity or pursuing personal happiness. Torn between her duty to treachery and her undeniable feelings for Alaric, she stood at a precipice. The clock was ticking, and every second felt like a drum roll heralding disaster. Could she risk it all by betraying her kingdom's dark design? In that fateful moment, the very air crackled with destiny, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Two kingdoms dangled like marionettes on strings pulled by a heart's whim, and the question loomed large. What would she choose when the whispers of conflict became a full-throated roar? In the dimly lit room at the edge of the Whispering Woods, the air buzzed with an almost electric tension. Alaric sat on a creaky wooden chair, wrestling with his own thoughts like a dog chewing on a bone. Half of his mind focused on Seraphine's piercing gaze that seemed to dissect him to his very core. Secrets hung between them like cobwebs catching the morning light, so fragile yet so binding. Meanwhile, shadows danced along the walls, whispering tales of treachery that had been brewing for far too long. Outside, the night croaked with the sound of distant frogs, as if warning the pair of the storm that was soon to engulf them both, while the scent of damp earth crept in through the cracked window, heavy with foreboding hints of what was to come. As the appointed hour drew near, both kingdoms braced themselves for the clandestine meeting that could change the course of their future. Unbeknownst to Alaric and Seraphine, Malgrave, sly as a fox and treacherous as a serpent, was plotting his underhanded schemes. His laughter echoed in the night as he stood cloaked in darkness. A puppet master, readying the strings he intended to pull. Clattering armor and hushed whispers echoed through the trees as the two would-be allies approached, their hearts pounding louder than a blacksmith's hammer on a summer's day. Little did they know, Malgrave had arranged a welcome party of sorts, just not the kind one would hope for when meeting allies for a drink over flagons of ale. Without warning, the tranquility of the night shattered like glass underfoot as arrows zipped through the air with the precision of a catapult in a medieval battle. Alaric barely managed to shove Seraphine down just in time, collapsing behind a nearby boulder as the thud of arrows struck where they had stood moments before. Heart racing, adrenaline coursing through his veins like a river in flood, Alaric cursed under his breath. Malgrave, you conniving rat. Meanwhile, Seraphine clutched her dagger tightly, a tempest of panic and rage swirling inside her, knowing that betrayal had come knocking at their door. The stench of fear, mixed with sweat, hung as thick as the fog that blanketed the woods. Each shallow breath growing deeper with urgency as they realized their survival hinged on unity. To escape the ambush, Alaric and Seraphine had no choice but to join forces, each reluctant step serving as a grudging lesson in trust. As they sprinted through the underbrush, their hearts thumped in sync, a strange rhythm forming amidst the chaos. This is just like a scene out of an adventure film, Seraphine quipped breathlessly, dodging a branch that seemed to have it out for her. Alaric couldn't help but chuckle, despite the dangers lurking behind them. Right, and I bet we end up with a blockbuster sequel if we survive this. Each shared laugh lightened the burden of shared secrets and suspicions, forging an unspoken bond in the face of impending doom. As the threatening war clouds gathered ominously in the distance, but just as they believed they had found their footing in this dance of survival, looming shadows once again threatened to engulf them in darkness. With every escape route blocked by treacherous foes, Alaric and Seraphine felt the weight of time pressing upon them like a leaden cloak. They were warriors now, caught in an unexpected alliance forged in the heat of deception and treachery. We need a plan, and fast, Seraphine said, her eyes blazing with determination. Agreed, but how do we outwit the very embodiment of betrayal? Alaric mused, the irony of their predicament harsh yet hilarious, their fates intertwined like an epic tale written by chance. As the drums of war echoed ever closer in the background, the air in Valor crackled with tension, the kind that sends shivers down your spine, and not just from the chilly breeze rustling through the banners. As the sun dipped low in the evening sky, casting a sanguine glow over the battlements, the kingdom prepared for what seemed like a full-scale apocalypse. Malgrave, in a fit of theatrical villainy worthy of a bad Saturday evening movie, had declared war, branding his attack as righteous retribution. His forces, a raucous mix of bloodthirsty mercenaries and disillusioned townsfolk, charged forth, a dark wave crashing against the shining walls of valor. Those ramparts had once stood as symbols of hope, but now they were about to become the stage for a night of chaos and clashing steel, each clang echoing like the tolling of a funeral bell for dreams of peace. But amidst the turmoil, heroes began to rise from unexpected places. Alaric, the grizzled warrior whose scars told tales of close calls with death, found himself not just leading the charge, but simultaneously wondering how he had gotten so old. Beside him was Seraphine, her hair whipping in the wind like a banner of defiance. Together, they were an odd duo, more mismatched than pancakes and pickles. But nonetheless, they united their forces with the fervor of nerds debating comic book lore. Alaric wielded a sword forged from the finest steel, while Seraphine brandished a staff, her eyes set aflame with an inner fire that rivaled the sun's last dying rays. As they stood shoulder to shoulder, destiny sneered. Unbeknownst to them, their true alliance had just begun to crystallize in the heat of the battlefield clamoring around them. As arrows whizzed past their heads, some missing by hair widths, Seraphine felt the familiar pulse of magic humming at her fingertips, a feeling both exhilarating and terrifying, like finding out you could suddenly summon lightning during a rainstorm. The air buzzed with the cacophony of battle, the sharp twang of bowstrings, the guttural cries of men, the clang of metal against metal melding into a chaotic symphony. She ducked and dodged, embracing her role not just as a fierce warrior, but as a peacemaker, a truly ironic twist for someone who spent more time tending gardens than battling warriors. In the heart of all this madness, her thoughts swirled like a tempest, threatening to sweep her away. But pushing through the onslaught was essential, as she had to be the balm to soothe Valor's wounds. It was her destiny calling, a voice rising above the din, urging her to face Malgrave and turn his twisted vision of revenge on its head. Then came the moment of truth as she spotted Malgrave through the fray, cloaked in ominous black like a Batman villain gone rogue, and defiantly wielding a sword that gleamed wickedly under the blood-red moon. Seraphine pushed forward, her heart pounding like a drum echoing through a still forest, ready to confront him in a duel that could decide the fate of the two kingdoms. The irony of it all, the man seeking vengeance against Valor was about to face the very essence of Valor itself, embodied in a woman wielding both sword and light magic. She could feel the energy crackling in the air around her, the tension so thick it could probably be sliced with a knife. But there was a calm certainty within her, a sense that, despite the chaos, she was exactly where she was meant to be, ready to forge a new legacy out of the ashes of treachery. As steel clanged against steel, the duel began, a dance of life and death in front of their shattered kingdom. Malgrave's eyes gleamed with madness, but Seraphine remained resolute, each swing of her staff resonating with the echoes of ancient wisdom, her energy glowing brighter as she repelled each brutal assault. With each clash, every twist and turn, she felt the support of valor's defenders behind her, their courage igniting a fire raging within her. She called upon her magic, unleashing a wave of shimmering energy, and as it pushed toward Malgrave, she realized this was not just a battle, but a symphony of hope against despair. In that moment, she wasn't merely fighting for survival, but sculpting a future for both kingdoms, bringing forth the ultimate irony, that from the depths of treachery and chaos, a new possibility of peace might be born. As the last echoes of clashing swords faded away, valor's banner fluttered proudly against the crimson sky, the very air still thick with the acrid stench of smoke and the metallic tang of blood. The battlefield, once a hellish cacophony of clamor and chaos, now lay a solemn testament to bravery and sacrifice. Amid the remnants of shattered shields and discarded weapons, Alaric stood tall, his chestnut hair tousled and sweat-slicked, a mix of triumph and grief etched across his battle-worn face, like an old rock band that had just hit their final note with a lingering guitar strum. Silence wrapped around the land, echoing the price they all paid for freedom. The time for mourning was upon them. Yet beneath the sorrow simmered a fierce spirit, one that would reignite the flame of hope in their hearts anew. It was then, amidst the whispered prayers of the fallen and the muted cheers of the victorious, that Alaric turned to Seraphine, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. They had endured trials that could forge a mountain or break a man. Yet here they stood, side by side, more united than ever. Alaric took Seraphine's hand, their fingers entwined like vines, reclaiming a forgotten castle, and proposed a treaty that would not just stitch their wounded kingdoms together, but create a tapestry vibrant with the threads of cooperation. You know, I heard that treaties are like relationships. If you don't water them, they'll wither away, he quipped softly, trying to chase away the solemnity of the moment. Seraphine chuckled, her laughter mingling with the crisp breeze, as they both recognized the gravity of their bond in turning the page of their shared history. The proposal rippled through the crowd like a wave crashing against a shore. Waves of disbelief and skepticism mingling with the cautiously optimistic cries of the people. Eyes darted back and forth, as if the very air crackled with skepticism. Pockets of murmurs filled the space, whispering tales of betrayal and trust lost. Yet, against the odds of bitterness aching for their attention, Alaric and Seraphine stood resolute, weaving stories of a united future that glimmered brighter than the best fireworks display. Imagine a world without treachery. Alaric bellowed, his voice rising above the clamor, where we share bread rather than sharpen swords. The crowd began to stir, the fire of possibility igniting whispers into cheers, coaxing their hearts out of the shadows where despair once lurked. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the kingdom in hues of orange and lavender, Alaric and Seraphine laid the groundwork for something many thought impossible, a new era of unity. They crafted laws, shared crops, and despite their hoverboards, a relic of a forgotten age, established joint festivals that merged both cultures into one delightfully chaotic whirl of color and laughter. Imagine a harvest festival where the choicest wines flowed like rivers, and the scent of baked goods wafted through the air, inviting everyone to partake, regardless of their past allegiances. It felt like a sudden fan-favorite sitcom renewed for another season, with all of its adored characters learning to embrace their quirks and foibles. Gone were the days of bitter factions, replaced instead with challenges met with laughter and a bright promise of tomorrow. And thus, as the world turned on its axis, with a cosmic wink of irony, this once splintered land began to find harmony in its diversity, a democracy of ferocious warriors and fearless diplomats. The past was not forgotten. Mind you, stories were told around roaring fires, reminding the young of their ancestors' sacrifices, but emphasizing hope over vengeance. Alaric, now known as the binder of bonds, and Seraphine, the weaver of prosperity, stood as the guiding lights in this newly forged alliance, reminding everyone that unity wasn't merely a distinct tune played by a single instrument, but a grand symphony where every note, no matter how off-key, could contribute to a magnificent crescendo. And under the watchful gaze of stars that shimmered like broken promises turned into dreams, they danced upon the ashes of old grievances, celebrating the dawn of something extraordinary. The promise of a bright tomorrow shimmered in their eyes, and every heart beat to the rhythm of unity, passionate as a pop anthem that refuses to die. In the bustling streets of colonial America, as whispers of rebellion floated through the air like autumn leaves, a firebrand named Abigail Adams fervently scribbled away in her quiet corner. Her quill danced with urgency, the ink pooling like molten resolve on the parchment. Remember the ladies, she implored her husband, John Adams, in letters filled with impassioned pleas. This wasn't just scribbling for sport. Abigail was penning the very essence of revolution, arguing that if men were to fight for freedom, women should also be considered vital players in the new nation. You could almost hear her voice echo, "Why does liberty and justice for all always seem to come with a tiny footnote?" It smelled like her husband's stubbornness, and the sweet promise of change mingled in the air, thick and electric. Meanwhile, not far from the Adams household, Mercy Otis Warren was weaving her own tapestry of rebellion, using ink and imagination instead of muskets and swords. The dim light of her candle flickered against the pages as she crafted sharp-edged plays that cut through the fog of public ignorance. Her words wove like a powerful spell, inspiring a wave of revolutionary fervor among those who dared to dream of a different world, one where women's voices weren't just background noise to the clanging of the men's war drums. Imagine her casting the local gentry as the bumbling British, served up with a side of irony and a dash of sarcasm, revealing the ridiculousness of their claims to superiority. The air around her was spiced with rebellion and camaraderie, intoxicating enough to stir even the most skeptical among them to join the fray. As musket balls whistled through the air and men donned their uniforms, women began to shed the shadows and rise like determined suns. Whether sneaking vital information past British lines, bandaging wounds under fire, or juggling the chaos of home and hearth, while the men were off chasing glory, their contributions became the backbone of the revolution. Picture the sounds of rustling skirts mingling with the dull thud of boots on packed earth, the smell of gunpowder curling into laughter as women shared tales of defiance over evening meals, with every pot of stew stirred and every secret whispered. These invisible warriors played a crucial role, even as the world seemed intent on keeping them in the kitchen. It was a strange twist of fate. Their courage, more potent than the strongest rum punch, fueled not just the soldiers, but the very spirit of the rebellion itself. You might think the battlefield was exclusively a man's domain, but the truth had a different taste, perhaps a bit salty, like the tears of women who waited at home. These tireless warriors endured the weight of uncertainty, transforming fear into action, organizing food drives, clandestine meetings, and even the occasional espionage. One misstep, it could mean imprisonment or worse. Yet they soldiered on, passing not just recipes, but also vital information from one family member to another. Every letter smuggled past sentinels wasn't just about survival. It was about purpose, an intoxicating cocktail of adrenaline and determination, burning in their bellies as bright as a bonfire. And so, as the musket smoke cleared, and the memories of valor emerged from the ashes. The contributions of these women loomed large, albeit often unseen. If you ever find yourself in the midst of a spirited discussion about who truly deserves the credit for American independence, just remember, behind every great man stood a woman who refused to be written out of history. In a world that often undervalues their efforts, the real drama unfolded far from the battlefield. It was in the hearts, letters, and homes of women like Abigail and Mercy that true revolution simmered, waiting to spill over and change everything. History, dear listeners, is not often about the heroes you would expect. It's the invisible hands that set the stage for a world that finally started to see their power. In the oppressive heat of a Boston summer, the air hummed with the buzz of discontent, a tension so palpable it could have sparked a fire. Abigail Adams and her close friend Mercy Otis Warren met in the dim light of a back alley tavern, their whispers mingling with the scent of stale ale and orange peel. The very walls seemed to lean in, eager for secrets and schemes. Together, they were not just women, they were part of a decisive shift in the game. They hadn't donned capes, but in their simple gowns, they might as well have been the superheroes of rebellion, ready to take on the British Empire with little more than pens and wits sharpened for battle, armed with intelligence gathered from eavesdropped conversations and furtive exchanges. They plotted and schemed like the best spies in a David Mamet film. Their small organization igniting a flame of resistance within the heart of their bustling town. As they moved deeper into their world of whispers and schemes, the courage of these women began to echo louder than any cannon blast on the harbor. Abigail and Mercy, soon joined by other daring women, began sabotaging British supply lines, a bit like a revolutionary version of Mission Impossible. Only instead of flashy gadgets, they were wielding sewing needles and baked goods. The sound of clattering pans in kitchens concealed messages about troop movements, while the tantalizing smell of baking, bread, often camouflaged plots, bubbling over like a pot left too long on the stove. Meanwhile, their fingers deftly inked letters with glittering secret codes, a sisterhood bound by bravery and cunning. Who knew that the revolution would be fueled not just by muskets, but also by muffins and espionage? Yet the stage of revolution wasn't solely set by white women like Abigail and Mercy. The resolve of enslaved women, such as Sally Hemings, added an urgent note to this cacophony of rebellion, with a spirit that would make even Katniss Everdeen proud. Sally not only worked under the gaze of her master, but also dared to form alliances, forging pathways of escape and resistance. Meanwhile, Phyllis Wheatley, a free woman of color, and a poet extraordinary fought her own battle, penning words that sang of freedom like a pop song stuck in your head. The scent of ink and ancient parchment filled her workspace, a contrast to the bitter taste of oppression that lingered in the hearts of many. Her verses became war cries, rallying those around her to rise for a cause that promised a better tomorrow for all. As these diverse women banded together, their actions sparked a movement that would reverberate through every corner of the revolutionary landscape. Together, they defied the expectations of a society that would have preferred their voices stifled, silenced behind closed doors. They weren't merely waiting for the men in their lives to change the world. They were stepping onto the battlefield in their own right. The air crackled with hope as they circulated news, played pranks on British soldiers, like dropping laundry lines of redcoats in the muck. They were making history, not just with revolution, but with humor, finding joy even in a world turned upside down by war. After all, nothing says rebellion like a good chuckle at the expense of the oppressor. So, as the whispers of rebellion grew into a chorus of demands for recognition and equality, it was clear that this fight for freedom could not succeed without the contributions of every woman involved. The powers that be thought they could ignore these spirited voices, but they were sorely mistaken, like a villain in a bad movie who fails to notice the hero's sidekick in the shadows. The resilience of these women, their laughter, and their fierce hearts painted a bold new chapter in history. Each secret meeting, each scribbled note, and audacious act of defiance became a thread woven into the tapestry of revolution. And so, amidst the chaos of battle and the smell of gunpowder in the air, the American Revolution became not just a fight for independence, but a rallying cry for women who refused to be sidelined in the struggle for freedom. Picture this. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting long shadows over the farm fields as Abigail looks out over her land. A steady mix of anxiety and determination swirling in her chest. Her husband, a soldier fighting for freedom, is off somewhere in the distance, while she, a woman of the earth, wrangles chickens and maneuvers plows, all while praying to the heavens for his safety. The scent of freshly turned soil mingles with the sting of sweat rolling down her brow, reminders that life goes on, even in war. With each beat of her heart, she feels the pangs of worry. Yet she steels herself. She must hold down the fort while juggling her children and the looming specter of uncertainty. Oh, the irony. Here she is, tilling the soil and sewing stitches, battling fears of her husband's demise, while those in power believe her place is solely in the home, blind to the storms she weathers each day. Then there's Mercy, wielding her pen like a sword. Words are her ammunition, and the ink is her lifeblood, flowing onto pages that ignite a flame of revolution in the hearts of those who read them. As her writings circulate, she feels the giddy thrill of sparking conversation, yet it's laced with a creeping dread, for loyalists lurk in the shadows, ready to punish any flicker of dissent. Imagine her pacing her small study, the scent of ink and paper suffusing the air, tensions coiling tight as she contemplates the implications of each powerful phrase. It's a risky game she plays, like trying to balance on a tightrope strung between two warring factions. But oh, how exhilarating it is to be seen as more than just a footnote in history. In towns across the colonies, women unite in unexpected ways, gathering supplies like modern-day superheroes in aprons. Armed with needles, thread, and the relentless spirit of survival, they transform scraps of fabric into uniforms and bandages, their hands moving with an urgency that echoes the chaos surrounding them. The smell of smoke from cooking fires envelopes the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of herbs crushed between fingers as herbalists and wise women concoct remedies to heal the wounded. These aren't just homemakers, they are warriors in their own right, rallying troops with hot meals and strong medicines. You'd walk into one of their kitchens and find a theatrical mix of clattering pots and emotional intensity, like a scene straight out of a cooking competition show, only with higher stakes. And the judges are draped in uniforms rather than chef's coats. As battles rage and the cries of men clash in the distance, the women find camaraderie even in their fears. They exchange glances over hastily brewed tea, comforting each other as they navigate their dual roles as nurturers and protectors. The sound of children's laughter mingles with the ominous thud of cannon fire, a stark reminder that joy and sorrow are two sides of the same coin in their lives. They huddle together, stitching and sharing stories, daring to defy the domestic confines that society has tried to impose upon them. Each shared laugh and whispered worry binds them tighter, strengthening their rebellion against the idea that their worth is measured by silence in the face of adversity. With each passing day, the line between domesticity and defiance grows increasingly blurred. As these women realize their power is uncontainable, a tempest waiting to be unleashed, they embody resilience, managing to flip the narrative from that of mere supporters to indispensable participants in the fight for independence. The sweet smell of blood, sweat, and revolutionary spirit fills the air, a testament to their sacrifices as they bravely navigate this new reality. It's a chaotic dance, filled with uncertainty and grit. But in the backdrop of a nation on fire, these women, Abigail, Mercy, and their sisters, stand tall, not just with their families, but for the legacy of freedom they are fiercely cultivating. The world will remember this era of upheaval, and it will remember their names, etched alongside the men who fought for liberty, but with a fierceness that can't be ignored. The air crackled with excitement during the siege of Yorktown, a palpable tension mixed with the smoky scent of cannon fire and sweat. Here, victory danced tantalizingly close, and amidst the chaos, Abigail Adams wielded her pen like a weapon, writing fervently to her husband, John. She implored him to remember the women in the new nation, urging him to embrace the idea that freedom wasn't just a privilege for men. Remember the ladies, she shouted through ink, representing an entire gender that was ready to take up arms for their rights as passionately as the soldiers on the front lines. It was a bold proclamation, one that echoed like the cannon blasts outside, reverberating through the very heart of a male-dominated society, insisting that women were more than mere footnotes in the chronicles of revolution. Meanwhile, Mercy Otis Warren, an ever-watchful sentinel of change, wasn't about to sit idly by. Armed with her pamphlets, she scurried through the town like a messenger with a mission, her words igniting the spirit of revolution among the community. They crackled in the air like fireworks, demanding unity and a resolute stand against tyranny. In her own way, Mercy was the opera of the revolution, giving voice to the voiceless. Her call for activism was like a drumbeat, urging neighbors to gather, to band together, as they rallied for the rights of not just men, but of every living soul yearning for justice. The town buzzed with anticipation, the scent of ink and paper intertwined with the distant echoes of musket fire, signaling that change was not only coming, it was already here. On an unseasonably crisp autumn day, the rally that had been brewing came to life, a vibrant tapestry of hope and defiance unfurling before spectators. Women from all walks of life joined hands like a grand symphony, their voices blending into a cacophony of dreams and determination. The air was thick with the fragrance of roasted corn and the tang of sweat as they raised their banners and their voices, demanding their rightful place in the story of freedom being written before them. Each shout was punctuated with the clattering of makeshift drums, their rhythm echoing the battle cries of the soldiers. It was as if the very ground they stood upon was vibrating with the fierce energy of generations, summoning the spirits of women past who had fought silently for a chance to be heard, reminding them that their resolve was anything but silent. As the rally crescendoed, the sounds of clapping, chanting, and impassioned speeches enveloped the crowd. Unyielding souls shared stories of sacrifice, new mothers who had given everything, wives who had taken up the mantle of their husbands, and daughters who had sewn uniforms with the dreams of liberty in every stitch. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Here were the very women who were often relegated to the shadows, now standing boldly in the spotlight. One could almost hear a collective gasp from the patriots huddled in the distance, who knew that the nation's freedom would ignite such fiery resolve among its women. It was a moment steeped in emotion and gravity, like the climax of a well-crafted play, where the audience held their breath in collective anticipation of what would come next. Yet beyond the rallying cries and spirited speeches, there was a truth simmering just beneath the surface. Women were not fickle or fragile, nor were they merely seeking sympathy. The sacrifices they made were as gritty as the dirt lines on their clothes after days of toil, and their courage was as fierce as a lioness defending her cubs. With each stride taken forward, each letter sent, and each gathering organized, these women reshaped the very narrative of the American Revolution. They stood there, defying the social norms of their time, shouting that they too deserved a seat at the table where the future of the nation was being carved. And while history may have overlooked them for too long, the roar of their collective voice during the siege of Yorktown became an anthem, a fierce reminder that the fight for freedom was indeed a shared endeavor, one that would ripple through the ages as the smoke of battle dissipated, and the sweet taste of freedom swirled through the air like the scent of fresh bread. The Revolutionary War wrapped itself in the celebratory embrace of independence, but while men strutted about with drums pounding and swords gleaming in the sunlight, a quiet thunder of realization rumbled beneath the surface. The fight for women's rights had just begun. Oh, dear Abigail Adams, with a quill in hand and fire in her belly, penned letters that echoed like distant cannon fire in the halls of power. Remember the ladies, she urged her husband John, a call for equality that would resonate for generations. Little did she know, her words would slowly carve a path that women the world over would march down, armed with pens instead of swords. Meanwhile, in a world where men don the titles of heroes, Mercy Otis Warren was stirring the pot of revolution with her sharp wit and even sharper pen. Her writings, filled with sass and undeniable truths, ignited passion among those who dared to dream of a world where women were celebrated as citizens, not shadows. Imagine her, scribbling furiously as tea brewed on the stove, perhaps referencing her contemporary theater, shouting, "To be a proper lady, one must first own her voice," as she flicked her ink-dipped quill with the finesse of a modern-day Beyoncé mic drop. Mercy made it clear that women, too, had a role to play in shaping the future. She knew that change wouldn't come from silence, and she wasn't about to rest until every woman had her chance to sing her own anthem of rights. The women of the revolution often stood in the backdrop, weary but fierce, hands calloused from labor and hearts beating with unrecognized bravery. As camp followers, farmers, and spies, they played crucial roles like secret agents in skirts, while everyone else appeared oblivious to their involvement. Imagine the earthy scent of sweat mixing with gunpowder as they toiled for a cause that seemed, at least in public discourse, to belong solely to men. They sharpened their resolve in the face of dismissal, reminding themselves that the crafting of liberty for all was a task best suited for everyone, not just half the population, though history would soon overlook their sacrifices. The seeds of women's advocacy were quietly taking root, preparing to bloom with an unyielding vigor. With the dust finally settling from the battlefield, the women began to gather around candlelit tables, their voices harmonizing like the whispers of a long-ignored song waiting to be sung. Each meeting was charged with unspoken dreams. Camaraderie flared to life alongside the flickering flames, simmering beautifully as they shared stories of heartache and courage. They forged alliances that would bolster their efforts to bridge the gaping chasm between the ideals of liberty and the realities of their existence. Envision them, hands clasped tightly, as they dared to declare to the budding nation, freedom isn't a one-size-fits-all coat. It's tailored for each and every one of us. With every gathering of determined spirits, the revolution had expanded its definition of liberty. Now, it held room for all, including women who steadfastly insisted they deserved more than mere footnotes in a history book. And so, as the final echoes of cannon fire faded and the banners of independence fluttered in the breeze, the stage was set for a revolution more glacial in its progress, yet every bit as fierce. Women, once relegated to the sidelines, were ready to take center stage. And though it wasn't quite a Broadway musical, they had the will to belt out their chorus for rights loud enough to be heard. The path forward would be fraught with challenges. Think of it like a never-ending game of dodgeball, where every throw feels like an arrow aimed at your heart. Yet, they would persist, igniting the flames of future movements that would demand justice and equality, skillfully painting their stories across the canvas of history. Indeed, they taught the nation this vital lesson. Freedom is a collective right, one that stitches together the fabric of society, thread by thread, voice by voice, until every tapestry reflects the beauty of diversity. In an age long before smartphones, where the most advanced tech was probably a well-crafted shovel, the Indus Valley was a bustling hub of activity. Imagine standing by the banks of the great Indus River, the water shimmering like the latest Hollywood blockbuster. Fields were lush, bursting with grains, and houses stood so meticulously arranged that even Marie Kondo would give a nod of approval. Yet, amidst this picturesque scene, a profound mystery loomed. A civilization that seemed to wake only to sleep back into the shadows of history. Enter Arjun, a young archaeologist with the spirit of Indiana Jones and the charm of a rom-com hero, nostrils flaring at the scent of ancient clay and dust as he sifted through the artifacts of a bygone era, hoping to unveil secrets hidden beneath layers of time and grime. His heart raced at every shard of pottery and rusted tool, like stumbling upon a limited edition action figure in a dusty old attic. As Arjun excavated, he found items more thrilling than a Scooby-Doo reveal. Beads, terracotta figurines, and vases with artful designs whispered tales of trade, culture, and life in the vibrant streets of Harappa. Each piece was a puzzle, a tantalizing breadcrumb leading him deeper into the enigma of the Indus civilization. The vibrant colors of the artifacts seemed to flicker with life, almost as if they could reach out and tell him their stories in hushed tones. He could almost hear the echoes of marketplace chatter and children's laughter wafting through the air like the spicy aroma of curry trickling from a nearby kitchen. Yet, as thrilling as the discoveries were, Arjun felt a tug of melancholy. It was as if the joy of the past also carried the weight of its tragic demise. With his heart as his compass, Arjun ventured beyond mere artifacts, probing into the very heart of the valley's tantalizing secrets. He studied the urban layout of Harappa, every street, every well, every brick laid so precisely it could give modern city planners a complex. From the airy courtyards that served as community hubs to the open drainage system, reminiscent of a society that had their act together way before we could figure out how to recycle. It was a testament to a people who valued cleanliness and organization. The more he learned, the more he marveled, imagining the bustling streets filled with merchants, the scent of fresh spices mingling with the cries of vendors hawking their wares. A far cry from the fast food frenzy of today, yet amidst the awe-inspiring achievements lay the ever-elusive question: what had caused this marvel of a civilization to falter and fade? Arjun's quest for answers felt like a quest for the Holy Grail, especially when he encountered what seemed to be the ancient script of the Harappans, symbols that danced across pots and seals, mocking his inability to decipher their meanings. With the tenacity of a cat on a laser dot, he scoured libraries and text, enlisting the help of linguists who squinted at the scripts like they were trying to solve a Rubik's Cube without the colors. His evenings became a blend of excitement and frustration, a maddening puzzle that haunted his dreams, while the script hummed its own secret lullabies. Were these marks mere rudimentary labels, or were they harbingers of grand stories that could unlock the mysteries of lives once lived? Time was fleeting, yet the thrill of discovery propelled him forward, like caffeine in a sleep-deprived student cramming for finals. As Arjun delved deeper, the valley's secrets opened up like a pop-up book, colorful, rich, and filled with surprises. Yet, he also uncovered the darker sides of the Indus civilization, the hints of environmental shifts, possible invasions, and social upheaval that could have led to its downfall. The valley, once bright with flourishing life, seemed to whisper a warning to the future, that even the grandest civilizations may crumble under the weight of their own complexities. With every revelation, Arjun felt a connection to those ancient souls, as if he were walking alongside them, breathing in the dust of ages past, and tracing the paths of their dreams and despair. As the rhythmic flow of the Indus River echoed the pulse of his discoveries, he realized that although the civilization may have vanished, its echoes would sing on, waiting to be heard by wandering hearts like his. Arjun sat in his dimly lit study, stacks of ancient texts piled high around him like a fortress of forgotten knowledge. With each page he turned, the whispers of the wise elders of Harappa slithered through his mind like a ghostly breeze, warning him of the calamity that had struck their civilization. As he scribbled notes, the smell of musty paper mingled with the fragrant chai cooling beside him, a gentle reminder that time continued to flow. Even if history had stalled, was he really prepared to uncover the secrets buried for millennia? Or was he dabbling in Pandora's box without a care? The flickering candlelight danced on the walls, conjuring shadows that seemed to nod knowingly at the hidden truths around him, coaxing him deeper into the lore of the Indus Valley's enigmatic past. Excitement surged like caffeine through his veins as he unearthed evidence of intricate trade systems, recalling bustling marketplaces where merchants peddled everything from beads to freshly caught fish. Each artifact he examined spoke of a sophisticated society that thrived not on conquest, but on collaboration and innovation, a dramatic twist from the Hollywood script of history that always glorified wars and kingdoms. He marveled at the advanced drainage systems, the urban planning, the precision of their weights and measures. It was as if he had stumbled into an episode of Ancient Architects Sans, the annoying host. But just as he began envisioning himself as the Indiana Jones of the Indus Valley, the air around him shifted, thick with an unshakable unease, like something unseen was watching, plotting to distract him from his noble quest. Suddenly, the tranquility of his scholarly haven shattered when he discovered that the very research documents he cherished had vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a chilling sense of dread. Each morning felt like the plot twist of a low-budget horror film, where the protagonist wakes up to find that the knickknacks they cherished have subtly switched places overnight. Only in Arjun's case, his cherished texts had simply evaporated. The tension escalated with each passing day, as the aroma of his favorite chai turned sour, mingling with a sense of impending doom. It wasn't long before he began to receive mysterious warnings. Black ink scrawled on rumpled paper and delivered without a trace, pleading him to abandon his exploration. They felt like script notes from a particularly antagonistic studio executive, cutting his fantasy short, yelling, "Cut." At the most exciting part, despite the mounting tension, Arjun refused to be intimidated. Channeling his inner Sherlock Holmes, he donned his metaphorical deerstalker cap and set about uncovering the mystery surrounding his research disappearance. With a blend of incredulity and determination, he pieced together the hints and clues like a scavenger hunt, using his coffee-stained notebook as a makeshift detective's log. The once gloomy corners of his study transformed into a stage for his investigation. Each rustling paper now a suspect in a game of whodunit. His senses tingled with excitement. The faint sound of an errant breeze echoed like a suspenseful soundtrack, and he could almost taste the adrenaline surging through his veins. Adding a pinch of salt to his otherwise bland research routine in a moment of epiphany, as he sifted through the chaos, Arjun realized that perhaps the very forces trying to thwart him bore messages themselves, urging him to lift the veil on the secrets of the Indus Valley. After all, what good is adventure without a little danger? Like eating an extra spicy curry that ignites your mouth and senses all at once. He chuckled to himself, realizing he must embrace this chaos, for in the whispers of the past lay both the warnings and treasures waiting to be discovered. With renewed vigor, he vowed to push through the darkness surrounding his mission, fully prepared to challenge whatever oddities lurked within the lost pages of history. After all, he wasn't just a researcher. He was Arjun, the fearless uncoverer of civilization's past. And nothing, not even a few frantic warnings, could shake him from his quest. The sun hung low in the sky, its golden rays transforming the rugged landscape of the Indus Valley into a shimmering tapestry of mystery and intrigue. Arjun stood on the threshold of adventure, his heart racing as he recalled the last words of his mentor, Dr. Mehta. There are truths hidden in the soil, waiting to be unearthed. However, those very words now felt heavy with foreboding, like a stone dropped in the silence of an ancient tomb. Dr. Mehta had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a whisper of what might have been a hidden truth that seemed to beckon Arjun closer, even as it loomed like a dark shadow overhead, threatening to engulf him whole. Who could have known that the valley held secrets mistier than a fog-covered movie plot twist at the end of a classic whodunit? As days turned into restless nights, Arjun found himself besieged by local superstitions more wily than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. The villagers warned him of restless spirits and ancient curses, spinning tales of shadowy figures lurking in the ruins, daring anyone to disturb their slumber. Arjun would have laughed it all off like an overblown horror flick, if not for the persistent chill that crept down his spine every time he ventured closer to the ancient citadels. Adding to the absurdity of his plight, rival scholars began springing up like weeds, each armed with their own set of wild theories and glaring intentions to scoop the discovery right from under his feet. It was like watching a group of award-winning actors rehearsing a cringeworthy parody of a treasure hunt where no one knew their lines, but everyone was in it for the glory, or at least the Instagram likes. Just when Arjun thought his weary heart had endured enough, fate turned and gifted him an unexpected ally. Leela, a spirited descendant of the original Harapans, with fiery eyes that sparkled with ancient wisdom. She approached him like a bolt of lightning, a living torrent of stories and history, eager to share the oral legacies her family had cradled through generations. Her tales rang with the resonance of a storyteller at a bonfire, filled with the crackling of excitement, nostalgic memories, and the scent of exotic spices wafting through the air. Leela narrated sagas of a civilization loaded with advancements, like city planning, that even modern cities envy, only for it all to be swallowed by the sands of time and ultimately forgotten. With every word that fell from her lips, Arjun felt the tendrils of despair loosen their grip. Perhaps there was hope yet, in understanding the balance between past and present, with a dash of mischief and a dollop of daring optimism. Armed with Leela's lore and a thirst akin to that of a hero from an action-packed blockbuster, Arjun and his new companion set off to unravel the tapestry of their ancestors' lives. Each step created a symphony of crunching gravel beneath their boots, harmonizing with the distant cries of birds circling overhead. They traversed through crumbling ruins where the air tasted like dust, thickened with centuries of secrets buried beneath centuries-old bricks that cracked under the weight of history. Together, they found themselves facing both the challenges of treacherous terrain and the pragmatic issues of survival, like when Arjun mistook a patch of wild berries for a delicious snack, instead of an explosive mix of flavors that had him regretting life decisions an hour later. Still, they pressed on, fueled by curiosity, humor, and the strange goosebumps of adventure that could only belong to a grand tale of lost civilizations. Yet the path ahead was tangled with not only physical hurdles, but also the unpredictable power of the valley's mystical elements, as if the land itself were alive, whispering warnings of danger in a language long forgotten by men. Shadows danced around them in the flickering rays of sunlight, conjuring eerie figures that could make any ghost story enthusiast shiver with delight or dread. Rumors flitted on the wind about cursed treasures and long-lost secrets, sending a thrill through Arjun, just like that moment when a hero dives into a world of unforeseen chaos, ready or not. With Leela by his side, Arjun felt an electric connection to the past, a stubborn flicker of hope amidst the overwhelming, darkening shadows. They were not just hunting truths, they were weaving alive a story older than time, a vibrant narrative waiting to unfold among the echoes of their ancestors. And somehow, beneath all the gravity of their mission, lay a sense of playful recklessness, like two adventurers seeking Pandora's box, while still arguing about what snacks to pack. Deep within the dusty ruins of Harappa, where the wind howled like a ghost longing for its past, Arjun and Leela found themselves on the brink of discovery. Their boots crunched over ancient bricks, the smell of damp earth clinging to the air like the aftermath of a bad party. As they ducked into a shadowy alcove, the flickering beam of Leela's flashlight illuminated a forgotten archive, hidden beneath layers of time and neglect. It felt like opening a time capsule, with the echoes of a civilization whispering stories of triumph and tragedy, revealing secrets that had long been buried in silty obscurity. I feel like Indiana Jones, but with less danger and more dust, Arjun quipped, wiping his brow, not quite ready for the flood of revelations poised to wash over them. As their hands brushed against the weathered scrolls and clay tablets, a wave of anticipation collided with dread. The inscriptions told tales of prosperity and harmony, but also of a cataclysm brewing beneath the surface, an unstoppable flood that had crept ever closer, as relentless as a villain in a blockbuster disaster movie. Every line they deciphered, every ancient symbol they wrestled with, painted a picture of a civilization blind to its impending doom. Leela's heart raced, a curious mix of fear and excitement, as it dawned on her that the very ancestors she had sought to connect with had ignored the same prophetic warnings she had experienced in her dreams. She could practically hear the echoes of her great-great-grandmother rolling her eyes and saying, "I told you so." The narrative spun wildly in Arjun's mind, each revelation unraveling the threads of mystery that had tangled around this lost civilization. He could imagine the townsfolk busy with their daily life, sipping spiced chai, as their crystal-clear rivers began to swell, oblivious to the power that lurked beneath the surface. If only they had a weather app, right? He joked, but the irony smacked him hard. This was their reality, an ancient society, sophisticated yet dismissive, seeing only what they wanted to see as the storms brewed. Leela, feeling the weight of the past, began to reconcile her own disconnect, realizing that her identity was deeply entwined with these people who let pride drown them beneath the waves of denial. In that dimly lit chamber, amid the echoes of a thriving but flawed society, healing began to unfold for Leela. The stories of relentless human spirit, the ambition, the social ties, and yes, the stubborn hubris mingled with her own. She felt the loss of her ancestors, transforming it into a balm that soothed her own quest for belonging. With passion igniting in her chest, she envisioned her roots as strong vines climbing toward the light, rather than ghostly whispers haunting her. It's like therapy, but with a side of archaeology and a splash of existential dread. She laughed, but every chuckle reverberated with newfound clarity, a cosmic realization that she was part of something bigger than herself. As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Arjun stood in awe. The mystery of the Indus Valley's downfall morphing from enigma to narrative. He breathed in deeply, the musty scent of ancient time mingling with a whiff of destiny as he confronted the ghosts of Harappa head-on. Here, in this cryptic vault, he had not just uncovered history, he had unlocked a treasure trove of lessons for the future. If only we could send them a postcard. Hey, future generations, don't ignore warnings seriously. It leads to floods and existential crises, he mused, his laughter echoing off the dilapidated walls. As they stepped back into the light, a sense of purpose pulsed between them, igniting their journey not as mere explorers, but emissaries of a lost world, armed with stories that needed to be told. As dawn broke over the sun-scorched plains of what was once the great Indus Valley, Arjun and Leela found themselves standing amidst the relics of a civilization that thrived thousands of years ago. The air buzzed with the electric thrill of discovery, blending with the earthy scent of ancient bricks stirred by the wind. Armed with shovels and an insatiable curiosity, they had unearthed secrets wrapped in the dust of time, treasures waiting to be shared. That very morning, they prepared to reveal the mysteries of the Harappan civilization, the great minds and meticulous planners who first turned mud into marvel. Little did they know, their findings would ripple across history books like a stone thrown into a still pond, raising questions about how fleeting prosperity can be, and how to avoid becoming the next footnote in the long story of civilization's rise and fall. With each artifact unearthed, Arjun and Leela felt the pulse of the past thumping energetically in their chests, like they were catching glimpses of a grand party they weren't invited to, but desperately wanted to attend. They uncovered pottery with exquisite patterns that spoke of artistry and function, and seals depicting animals that seemed to leap off the stones. Remembering a scene from Indiana Jones, they joked about needing a fedora, but instead they donned dusty gloves. Yet, despite the playful banter, a profound weight settled over them. These discoveries weren't just objects. They were echoes of the lives once vibrantly lived. Lessons on sustainability tightly woven into the fabric of Harappan society. The irony wasn't lost on them. In their quest to tap into ancient wisdom, they sought to revive practices of harmony with nature that our modern-day society often neglects. Like a tech-obsessed teenager, ignoring their family's advice on a balanced diet, news of their findings spread like wildfire, gripping scholars and curious minds alike, eager to devour stories of this lost civilization. They held press conferences where Arjun compared the Harappan brick streets to the sidewalks of modern cities, marveling at how some things never change. You'd think after thousands of years, we'd learn how to build better roads, he quipped, eliciting laughter from their audience. However, as the crowd quieted, Leela passionately urged her listeners to grasp the bigger picture, emphasizing that the Harappans maintained a reverence for water management and community. Their civilization thrived not on excess, but on shared wisdom, an echo beckoning the modern world to consider its gluttonous habits in stark contrast with their commendable restraint. Days turned into weeks, and as they reminisced about their journey together, the friendships forged in the soil of ancient cities deepened into something more lasting than just professional camaraderie. After long evenings spent over cups of steaming chai, they recounted tales of their respective pasts. Arjun's grandfather, who adorned himself with war medals, and Leela's grandmother, whose stories danced like fireflies in the night. They had plunged into history's depths together, not merely as archaeologists, but as entwined souls seeking meaning in the whispers of the past. It felt akin to binge-watching a Netflix series, as each episode pulled them closer to the climax, realizing that the indomitable resilience etched into the Harappan narrative mirrored their own pursuits. These two were on a quest to honor not only the remnants of lost civilizations, but also the ancestral threads binding them to those who had come before, leaving an indelible legacy that wasn't just for the history buffs, but also for future generations. In their final reflection amidst the ruins, Arjun and Leela stood side by side, feeling an almost magnetic connection to the unbending spirit of the Harapan people, with birds circling overhead and the dusty sun setting behind ancient walls. They pondered what future generations would find of their own civilization. Would they, like the Harapans, be remembered for ingenuity and sustainability? Or would they leave only a trail of toxically glittered selfies and defunct gadgets in their wake? Strains of irony colored their musings as they chuckled darkly at the thought of future archaeologists sifting through today's electronic debris. Their parting wish, an echo of the lessons they had unearthed, resonated in their hearts to honor the past not just as a relic, but as a guide, a roadmap toward a more sustainable future, reminding everyone that every civilization has a story worth telling and a lesson to hold on to. In the heart of Chang'an, where the air buzzed with a cacophony of merchants hawking their wares, and the scent of spiced foods wafted through bustling streets, a young merchant named Zhen tightened his grip on a weather-worn map. The Silk Road stretched before him like a serpent of opportunity, winding through deserts and mountains, promising adventure and riches beyond imagination. He felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. It wasn't just a path for trade. It was a lifeline connecting disparate cultures. As Zhen stepped into the sunlit chaos, he couldn't help but think this was the ancient equivalent of a road trip with the potential for life-altering detours, minus the existential crises that often came with them. As he ventured deeper into the unknown, Zhen encountered more than just the rugged terrain. He met a colorful parade of characters, each carrying their own stories and goods. There was Aimed, a Persian scholar whose robes billowed like the sails of a ship, and whose words were laced with the wisdom of ages. Their banter crackled like a well-oiled comedy duo, as Aimed recounted tales of stars that guided sailors and philosophers who debated the nature of reality. Then came Priya, an Indian spice trader, whose vibrant saris juxtaposed with the dusty landscape, and whose laughter was as rich as the cardamom she carried. Together, they formed an unlikely trio, united not only by their commodities, but also by an insatiable thirst for knowledge that would soon fuel their epic journey. The road twisted and turned through sandy dunes that shimmered like golden waves under a relentless sun, each step crunching on gravel, while their laughter echoed in the open air. At a remote oasis, they set up camp, sharing stories over a crackling fire that illuminated their faces against the darkening sky. With each trade of goods, silks, spices, and scrolls of wisdom, the trio realized that they weren't just exchanging objects, they were swapping pieces of their identities. Priya would talk about the art of blending spices, her hands illustrating the dance of flavors, while Zhen pondered how the silk Isolde might one day grace the shoulders of a royal, or perhaps even a pop star in some future imagined reality. Even aimed, with his heavy tomes on philosophy, joined in, prompting them to consider whether a silk dress or a fragrant curry could ever transform a person's destiny. But all was not smooth sailing. Each crossing brought its own set of challenges. One evening, as a fierce desert wind kicked up grains of sand that stung their faces like tiny fists, they found themselves cornered by a band of thieves intent on robbing not just their goods, but their very spirit. The crisis summoned a strange camaraderie that felt like a movie scene, where the band of misfits band together against the odds. Armed only with their wits and an impressive collection of well-placed insults, the trio turned the tables and sent the thieves running, their laughter mingling with the storm of dust. In that moment, they solidified a bond that no amount of silk could sever, a reminder that sometimes the toughest trials bring people closer than any trade ever could. As their journey drew to a close, Jeanne, Aimed, and Priya arrived at a magnificent city where the echoes of their travels converged. They stood before a bustling marketplace, alive with the vibrant sounds of sellers vying for attention, and the scent of spices perfuming the air. Each man and woman, there was a walking showcase of cultural intermingling, a testament to the Silk Road's power to unite and transform. Jeanne realized that while he had set out to enrich his own pockets, what he gained instead was far more valuable, a kaleidoscope of friendships and knowledge that redefined his view of the world. With a cheeky grin, he declared that their journey had made them not just traders of goods, but artisans of tales, woven together in an intricate tapestry that would inspire generations to come. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the rugged terrain as Jeanne and his ragtag band of companions trudged forward. Each step was a gamble, as the icy winds howled like angry spirits, rattling their bones and threatening to burrow under their skins. Jagged mountains loomed above them, a menacing array of stone and snow that seemed to mock their resolve. But amidst the chill, laughter erupted when the robust Persian scholar, Ali, slipped on a patch of ice, sending a cascade of snow flying into the air, dusting Jeanne's face like a shoddy snow globe. See, Ali chuckled, brushing off his pride. Even the mountains have a sense of humor. Together they pressed on, each misstep forging bonds thicker than the frost on their cloaks. As they navigated the treacherous cliffs and slippery roads, tales of danger seemed to close in around them like a pack of wolves, each growl a reminder of the lurking bandits. Despite the threat, the spirits remained high, as the group seemed to play an intricate dance with danger, where wit was their only weapon. It was during one chilly night, huddled around a flickering fire, its flames licking the air like wild cats, that the rich tapestry of knowledge began to unfurl. Each companion took turns sharing their wisdom, and with the crackling of the fire, Zhen became an eager apprentice of the cosmos. Ali delved into the mysteries of mathematics and astronomy, illustrating the heavens with his hands, while the night sky above sparkled like a diamond-studded cloak, each star a whispered secret waiting to be uncovered. As the sun rose to greet the new day, draping the world in golden hues, the atmosphere was charged with excitement and joy. It was here that Mohan, the Indian trader with a flair for storytelling, took center stage with a voice that rolled like thunder and a demeanor that could charm a snake out of its skin. He spun epic tales of enchanted kingdoms, ferocious beasts, and heroic figures. His words dripped with the rich spices of his homeland, punctuated with laughter that echoed off the cliffs. As Zhen listened intently, he could almost taste the saffron and rejoice in the rhythmic pulse of ancient drums, as if he were dancing across the landscapes that were birthed from Mohan's tales. Each story became a thread, weaving their lives together, binding their hearts tighter than the rope that secured their wagons. Just as they began to feel like conquerors of the earth, a gang of bandits emerged from the shadows, their laughter as sinister as the knife you never see coming. But instead of panic, the companions rallied. With a wink and a nod, Ali whispered, "Let me handle this," and began reciting the Pythagorean theorem with all the passion of a Shakespearean actor on opening night. Before they knew it, the bandits were scratching their heads, baffled, and in that moment of intellectual swordplay, Zhen realized that knowledge was mightier than the sword, or, in this case, the knife. The confusion of their attackers gave the group the perfect opportunity to slip away, leaving behind a gang of bewildered, grumbling bandits who likely wouldn't even remember to rob their next caravan anymore. As they trudged deeper into the wild paths of the Silk Road, Zhen's heart felt lighter, carried not just by the provisions they shared, but by a newfound friendship. Each exhausting climb now came with the laughter born from shared stories, and every scrape and bruise gleamed with the glow of wisdom exchanged. They were not just travelers, they were scholars and storytellers, their destinies interwoven like the threads of the finest silk. Under the night sky, with the wind singing through the valleys like an ancient lullaby, they vowed never to forget the lessons tucked away in their hearts, the knowledge, the stories, the laughter, and even the icy pratfalls. And as they prepared to face whatever came next on this winding road, Zhen couldn't help but smile, thinking that the biggest treasures weren't the silks or spices, but rather the whispers of wisdom shared amongst them. Imagine if you will, a bustling marketplace overflowing with life, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds in the heart of a city renowned for its exquisite fusion of cultures. Along the Silk Road, the air hung thick with the cloying sweetness of candied fruits, mingling with the piquant aroma of spices that could knock your socks off. Merchants from far-flung lands, clad in garments so majestic they could make a peacock blush, set up stalls brimming with exotic crafts. Think intricate Persian carpets, delicate Chinese porcelain, and intricate beadwork from the heart of Africa. Laughter and chatter filled the air like the chaotic soundtrack of some epic blockbuster, while the rhythmic drumming of hands on tables created a heartbeat that seemed to pulse through the very ground beneath their feet. In this vibrant marketplace, the trio felt the exhilarating buzz of anticipation, where cultures were about to clash and harmonize in a grand spectacle of humanity's finest traits: creativity and connection. Zhen, spurred on by the festival's dynamic energy, felt a surge of inspiration that practically flowed through him like a river of creativity. With the heart of a bard and a flair for the dramatic, he found himself at the center of an impromptu gathering, sharing tales from his homeland, shiny dragons, and brave warriors dancing like fireflies in the night. His words painted vivid pictures, and the delighted audience hung on every syllable as their laughter swelled and mingled with the aroma of sizzling skewers of meat being grilled to perfection nearby. As he wove his stories of family traditions, where the moon brought families together for feasts that could put Thanksgiving to shame, Zhen realized that he wasn't just sharing his culture. He was building bridges that spanned continents. The atmosphere grew heavy with camaraderie. Everyone seemingly united under that great festival banner, fluttering in the warm breeze, like something out of a fairy tale, where differences met not with scorn, but with a hearty handshake and a smile. But the harmony was fragile, like an eggshell teetering on the edge of a table during a heavy metal concert. As night descended and lanterns glowed like tiny stars scattered across the ground, tensions began to bubble to the surface. Mismatched beliefs clashed like cymbals in an orchestra where nobody bothered to read the sheet music. The clash of opinions could have given a heavyweight bout a run for its money. One merchant from the north, excitedly peddling his fur, found himself arguing with an artisan from the south, proud of her light, flowing fabrics, about who had the superior crafts. Meanwhile, the spicy smells of sizzling dishes turned sour as voices rose, casting an unforeseen shadow over the once jubilant gathering, a festival that had teetered on the brink of chaos, threatening to morph into a soap opera worthy of binge-watching on a rainy afternoon. Yet, amidst the arguments popping like unwanted popcorn kernels, Jeanne saw a glimmer of hope, like a needle in a haystack, or more accurately, a pizza slice in a salad bar. Taking a deep breath, he stepped between the feuding factions, standing tall like a hero from an adventure film. What if we celebrate our differences instead of letting them divide us? He proposed, his voice resonating through the garden of assembled souls. A kitchen like no other. Imagine a tapestry woven from our stories, shimmering with our experiences. The skeptics silenced into thoughtful murmurs, and slowly, a curious spark ignited as others, intrigued, began sharing their own stories, transforming tension into dialogue, like a jazz band improvising a sweet melody that just might win over the crowd after all. In that moment, laughter returned, resonating through the air like a pop song on replay. A joyful reminder that life tasted best when infused with a splash of diversity. As the festival swelled back into its earlier vibrancy, the merchants began to collaborate, blending cuisines and crafts, as if spaghetti and sushi decided to marry in a culinary fairy tale wedding. The clinking of glasses filled the air amidst the delighted shouts of children, and the smells of street food now wafting together in a delightful culinary symphony. It was a carnival where everyone had a seat at the table. The festival became a celebration of life itself, a reminder that every thread, every flavor, and every story enriched the grand tapestry of humanity. As Jeanne basked in this newfound unity, he couldn't help but think, hey, maybe this is the real magic of the Silk Road after all. Picture a bustling festival where the air is thick with the aromas of roasted meats and spiced pastries, mingling in a dizzying dance. It was supposed to be a time of joy, yet the tension crackled like a live wire. Traders snarled at each other, eyes darting like frightened rabbits, as rival factions loomed like storm clouds overhead. Amidst this chaos, brave Jeanne stood tall, a lone figure in a sea of discontent. What if, just hear me out, folks, he declared, his voice cutting through the din. We all showcase our crafts together. Cue the skeptical raised brows and the side eyes. It was like suggesting a karaoke night at a funeral, but he had a spark of hope, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of madness to boot. Jeanne waited, heart pounding like a drum solo in a rock concert, as murmurs rippled through the crowd. The leaders from conflicting factions stared each other down like cat and dog neighbors on the brink of World War III. After what felt like an eternity, filled with the kind of awkward silence that could make a mime squirm, a reluctant agreement emerged, though it was about as enthusiastic as a kid being told to eat broccoli. The idea was simple. Each culture would showcase their crafts, their music, their story, and the chaos began to slowly unfold into something unexpectedly beautiful. The clash of colors, sounds, and fragrances began to transform the festival into a vibrant tapestry, stitched together with threads of history and human connection. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow across the market stalls, the performances kicked off. Drums thumped and danced in sync with the pulse of excitement, while intricate silk tapestries whispered tales of ancient journeys. One could almost hear the fabric rustle like the leaves in a harmonious breeze. Laughter erupted as a troupe of dancers twirled, their costumes shimmering like fish scales in the sunlight, the grace of their movements punctuating the air with joy. With each act, the barriers began to melt away like snow in spring, revealing the warm hearts beneath the hardened surfaces. It was as if the festival had swallowed a magic potion. Everyone forgot their grievances and embraced the fleeting, electrifying moment of unity. Soon enough, the mingling of cultures led to a delightful mix of traditions. Zhen watched from the sidelines, a grin stretching across his face, wider than a Cheshire cat at a tea party. Someone from the north baked pastries with spices so exotic they'd make even a cinnamon roll wobble with jealousy, while the southern singers belted out tunes that had everyone swaying like trees in a gentle wind. The shared laughter echoed like the joyous giggles of children, with faces painted and hands dusted with flour. Or was that flour mixed with misery from some epic flower fight? It was a feast for the senses, the sounds, sights, and smells merging like old friends, happily reminiscing over a shared meal, their differences forgotten like a bad haircut from high school. As night fell, the stars twinkled overhead like judgmental cheerleaders. But down below, the mood was buoyant, charged with a sense of camaraderie that hadn't been felt in ages. Think Avengers assembling, but with less spandex and more spices. The festival transformed from an impending showdown into something majestic, a kaleidoscope of humanity woven together through laughter and artistry. Zhen felt a swell of pride, marveling at how mutual respect can sprout from the roots of chaos, transforming a battlefield into a brocade of fragile friendships. Finally, a deep breath filled their chests, not of resignation or tension, but of unity, where diversity wasn't just a footnote, but the headline act, crowned with love and laughter. Who knew that a spark of creativity could save the day like a hero swooping in at the last moment, cape billowing in the wind? The festival, in all its colorful glory, was a celebration of life itself. Under the vibrant tapestry of a crimson sunset, the festival thrummed with life, a concoction of laughter, music, and the tantalizing scent of sizzling lamb skewers wafting through the air. Zhen, the Persian scholar, stood shoulder to shoulder with his newfound companion, an Indian trader whose colorful shawl danced like a peacock as he gestured animatedly. Together, they navigated through a crowd bursting with vendors selling everything from aromatic spices to intricate silk goods that shimmered in the dying light. You could almost hear the whispers of ancient psalms and shopkeepers' haggles blending into a rich symphony of commerce. Truly a scene that would put even the most dynamic of block parties to shame. They were not just two men among many. They were architects of a bridge connecting minds, hearts, and cultures, as diverse as the colors they wore. As the festivities carried on, Zhen and the trader discovered that their connection ran deeper than mere exchanges of goods. It was as if they were characters in an epic saga, each adding to a vast, interwoven tapestry of shared stories and wisdom. They spent hours under the plush canopies, sipping spiced chai that burned slightly on the way down, yet warmed their souls in ways that modern coffee shops can only dream of. Tales of the stars guided Zhen's scholarly musings, while the trader recounted epic tales on the art of bargaining and the significance of every trinket he sold. You could almost hear the cosmic gears turning in their minds, understanding that what they forged wasn't just a friendship, it was a partnership in the pursuit of enlightenment, a little slice of the universe packaged in friendship, with their minds swirling with ideas and hearts brimming with camaraderie. Zhen and the Indian trader soon realized they were part of something much larger. They were players in a grand game called cultural exchange. This dance of ideas and commerce spun threads that historically bound distant lands like the interstellar bonds in a superhero movie, making the universe feel smaller and tighter with every passing moment. They put aside their roles as mere vendor and scholar to embody the essence of human connection, laughing over shared meals and debating the nature of existence as if they were ancient philosophers in a dusty library. It was jaw-dropping to think how the leather soles of their shoes carried them not just across land, but into the hearts of those who would listen, embracing the richness of every culture like a buffet of knowledge waiting to be devoured. Who knew that amidst all the silk and spice, they were stitching together the fabric of humanity itself. As they made their way back to their respective lands, the weight of their journey lay heavy on their backs, not unlike the feeling of lugging around an oversized suitcase packed with memories. Back home, each had stories that would ignite a fire in the hearts of those who craved more than day-to-day mundanity. Zhen envisioned the faces of curious students, their eyes lighting up with fascination as he recounted tales of marketplaces alive with colors and sounds as numerous as the stars. The Indian trader, in turn, return, saw families gathering around him, their ears wide open, ready to soak in the wisdom of distant civilizations as avidly as they consumed their favorite curries. They didn't realize it yet, but with every story told, they were planting seeds of understanding in their communities, sprinkling a bit of the Silk Road's magic into their very own backyards. In a world that often felt divided by borders, Shen and the Indian trader had unknowingly become the torchbearers of unity. Their friendship, a reminder that the Silk Road didn't die. It evolved. Generations to come would hear these tales and be inspired to think beyond their own narrow neighborhoods, transcending the very limitations society seemed set on constructing. With their every word, they conjured a legacy that echoed through the valleys and across the hills, whispering to children at bedtime about faraway lands and the wonders they hold, like a never-ending chain reaction sparked by a mere idea. Their alliance would remind everyone that cultural exchange isn't just about trade. It's the ultimate superpower that fuels the human spirit. And who would have thought that all it took was a festival, a few laughs, and a willingness to share food and stories. It really is a small world after all. Picture this. Summer 1587. A fleet of ships slicing through the choppy waves of the Atlantic like a knife through soft butter. A motley crew of colonists, their hopes as high as a kite, huddled together on the deck, their stomachs churning like the tempestuous sea around them. At the helm was John White, a man whose determined gaze could probably tame a grizzly bear. With the salty spray of ocean mist clinging to their faces, and the scent of adventure wafting through the air, they were buoyed by dreams of a fresh start on Roanoke Island. Little did they know, the real adventure was only just beginning, and it was going to be a doozy, like a reality show without a safety net, or in this case, a reliable plan. As they finally set foot on Roanoke, the sight was starkly beautiful. A landscape of dense woods and untamed foliage that smelled of earth and mystery. But the intoxicating scent of possibility quickly mingled with a sense of foreboding. The colonists soon discovered that Mother Nature wasn't their only challenge. The indigenous tribes surrounding the island greeted them with wariness, their expressions as cryptic as a riddler puzzle, with tension mounting like a suspenseful score in a horror film. John White knew that every word exchanged could crackle with misunderstanding. This was no picnic in the park. It felt more like stepping onto the stage of a Shakespearean drama without a script. Days turned into weeks as the colonists grappled with the island's concealed dangers, a reality check that slapped them more fiercely than a gale-force wind. The lush greenery that had promised sustenance began to morph into a stark reminder of their uncertainty, as crops refused to cooperate, and the haunting cry of a hawk echoed through the air like the ominous soundtrack of impending doom. With every day, the hard ground felt less like a welcoming embrace and more like a bed of nails, as fatigue seeped into their bones like the morning fog. And let's not even start on dinner, which often consisted of anything they could catch, gather, or barter, leaving most with stomachs that were not impressed, to say the least, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery hue across the sky. A flicker of hope ignited among the weary settlers. They rallied together, sharing dreams of prosperity and daring visions of their future, their voices blending into a chorus of determination that echoed through the trees. It was like a community meeting gone rogue, with everyone fueling each other's ambitions and resilience. But beneath the surface of shared aspirations, a simmering pot of anxiety began to bubble, mingling with their resolve. The reality of their vulnerability weighed heavily in the summer air, thickening like molasses, as the settlers realized that every step forward could lead them down a treacherous path, to places they never intended to go. So there they stood, surrounded by the vast wilderness, their hearts pounding not just from the thrill of the unknown, but also from the prickly reality check that lay ahead. John White, ever the steadfast leader, fought to maintain morale with stories of glory and triumph, the type of tales that would make any explorer want to shout, "Adventure awaits." But deep down, even he couldn't shake the eerily quiet whispers of doubt lingering in the air. In this uncharted territory, they were like actors in a play where the director had mysteriously gone missing, leaving them high and dry on stage. As the stars twinkled overhead, a reminder of the countless eyes watching their tale unfold, one thing felt crystal clear. This was just the beginning of a narrative that would unravel into a tapestry of mystery, heartache, and perhaps, just maybe, a flicker of hope as December's icy breath settled into Roanoke. The colony shimmered with frost, but the enthusiasm that once danced in the settlers' hearts began to wither. The biting cold gnawed at their fingers and toes, making every chore feel like an Everest expedition in a blizzard. Snowflakes, like tiny shreds of paper, floated down, blanketing the ground in a deceptive beauty that belied the despair creeping into the settlers' very souls. As the last remnants of their stored food dwindled, the sound of gnawing stomachs became the new background music to their daily struggles, a mix of hunger and desperation that no amount of jolly holly could cheer up. The cheerfulness that characterized their summer had been replaced by the bleak gray of winter, turning hearty laughter into cautious whispers and complaints about frozen toes. As morale drained faster than a leaky barrel, Tensions began to bubble over like a pot left too long on the stove, except this pot was full of conflict. With frustration bubbling under the surface, debates about everything from hunting rights to food rations became fierce. Echoing through the austere winter landscape, John White, with the anxious eyes of a dad losing his kids to a game of Monopoly, sensed the growing unrest and knew he had to make a tough call. Setting aside his own fear, he made the gut-wrenching decision to sail back to England for supplies, basically leaving the colony like a parent who promises a trip to the amusement park, but instead takes a detour to the grocery store. The colonists stood on the shore as his ship faded into the horizon, uncertainty wrapping around them like a damp blanket that no amount of firewood could dry out. In the stillness following White's departure, the whispers took on lives of their own, rumors about storms darker than the plot twists in a reality TV show began to swirl like winter winds. The settlers, already starving and weary, were now faced with the prospect of ominous weather and violent skirmishes with local Native Americans who, let's be honest, were likely not happy about the new neighbors invading their territory. The air thickened with tension, and the bushes rustled ominously, as if even the wind was gossiping about the colonists' ill fate. The watchful eyes of the natives, while not hostile at all times, now looked upon the colonists with a mix of curiosity and caution, much like cats sizing up a new dog in the house. Such precariousness brewed anxiety, causing even the most basic of interactions, trading, greeting, to feel heavier than a pot of collard greens. Mornings turned to nightmares as the relentless cold swept through the settlement, causing cheeks to blush with frost rather than health. And the once grand visions of thriving civilization began to erode like sandcastles at high tide. Bread made from grinding acorns and bark became the staple if you could find the acorns. That is, the smell of rotting vegetable scraps filled the air, a pungent reminder of hope dashed. The colonists huddled around flickering fires, sharing stories that felt like ancient folklore, tales of better times and lost dreams, their voices barely rising above shivering teeth. In contrast, laughter was replaced by somber nods, and the jokes about winter wonderlands fell flat, sounding more like desperate pleas than punchlines. With the specter of disaster looming larger each day, every shriek of wind felt like a haunting reminder that they might just be on borrowed time. Despite all the gloom, a flicker of resilience clung to the colony like stubborn weeds pushing through cracks in the cement. Some colonists clung to memories of freshly baked bread and green fields, while others took to the woods, fueled by stubbornness and a hint of madness, like warriors on a quest with no promised kingdom to return to. They scavenged for any food they could find, dodging feral cats, and trying to negotiate with nature as if it were the ultimate final boss in a video game. Yet, beneath the thick layers of frost that clung to their bones, a community began to form as they shared stories of perseverance, threading their experience together like an intricate tapestry. As tensions with the Native Americans shifted, the dawn of understanding began to peek over the horizon, hinting that survival might not solely depend on John White's supplies, but also on their own grit and camaraderie, their last stand against the encroaching void. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the choppy waters, White's voyage back to Roanoke was anything but a leisurely cruise. A powder keg of conflict was brewing between England and Spain, and ships laden with supplies were caught like a fish out of water in a blockade that made it feel like he was lost in a Netflix original series, one that just kept dragging on. Even the winds seemed to conspire against him, as if they were playfully whispering, "Oh, you thought you could just sail back home. Not today." With every delay, the thrill of adventure began to morph into a desperate longing, one that hung in the salty air like a thick fog, weighing heavy on his chest. Meanwhile, back at Roanoke, the remaining colonists felt the tightening grip of anxiety as they stared longingly at empty horizons, hoping for any sign of their leader. The supplies they had once taken for granted dwindled, like a party's last slice of pizza, every night becoming a gamble, where everyone prayed they wouldn't pull the short straw for dinner. Starvation had a way of inviting not just hunger, but fear, and the once bustling camp now echoed with the hollow sound of growling stomachs and whispered doubts. The very air thickened with tension, and they could almost taste the desperation. It was a seasoning no one wanted in their recipes for survival. Days turned into weeks, and for the colonists, the simple act of waiting became a cruel game of psychological warfare. Each sunrise was a reminder of their growing isolation, and numberless conversations shifted from hopeful predictions to dark murmurs of disappearance. "Maybe the damned Spaniards got him," one guy joked, trying to crack a smile, while beneath the laughter lay the sharp sting of fear. The irony was palpable. Here they were, a band of adventurers, yet they faced threats not from the wild or hostile natives, but from the void of absence and uncertainty, like a sitcom that suddenly lost its main character in a cliffhanger. As days crawled by, whispers of disappearances began to swirl like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. The settlers exchanged glances over the flickering firelight that danced atop remnants of their last feast. What once smoldered with camaraderie now crackled with paranoia, as each creak of the surrounding trees seemed to murmur ghostly tales of those who had vanished. Could it be that their fellow settlers had succumbed to the primal call of the dense woods, joining the ranks of lost souls haunting the Virginia backcountry like a classic horror film? They were trapped in a true-life enigma. Every shadow and rustle of the leaves sending shivers down their spines. Amidst the growing fear, a twisted sense of humor emerged among the settlers, a defense mechanism against the gloom that threatened to suffocate them. You know, if this was a movie, we'd definitely have the group of survivors bickering over who gets the last can of beans. One woman quipped while trying to keep the camp's spirit alive. Laughter, though thin and fragile, became an act of rebellion against despair, buoying their spirits even as provisions ran dangerously low. They spoke in hushed tones and wild gestures, weaving tales of what had happened to White as though conjuring him back into existence. But as the stars blinked down in their eternal vigil, the cruel reality loomed larger. Time was their greatest enemy, and with it, their dwindling hope. The salty breeze whipped around John White as he stepped off the boat. A seasoned explorer now, racked with a cocktail of hope and dread. It had been 3 long years, 3 merciless sunrises since he left Roanoke Island, promising to return with supplies for his beleaguered colony. But the cozy chatter of colonists, the scent of sweet corn on the cob, and the burst of laughter shared over a well-cooked meal were all gone, replaced with a deafening silence that felt heavy enough to drag him under. The wooden fortifications stood like lonely sentinels, creaky and weathered, their paint blistering like sunburned skin. John's heart raced. The island felt like an abandoned set from a horror movie, where ghostly whispers lingered just out of earshot. As he surveyed the desolate landscape, his keen eyes caught a flash of stark white against the weathered bark of an ancient tree Croatoan. It read, etched into the wood with a haunting permanence. At that moment, it was as if the words themselves were mocking him, the mystery of their meaning twisting into a riddle more perplexing than any puzzle he'd encountered during his voyages. Did it signal a peaceful relocation to the nearby Croatoan island? Or was it a desperate cry for help from his fellow settlers? John felt a trickle of ice creep down his spine as paranoia seeped in. And suddenly, the thought of lurking dangers, hostile natives, treacherous weather, or worse yet, a chaotic betrayal from within began to dance through his mind like restless shadows. The trees seemed to lean in closer, listening intently, as if the island were conspiring to keep its secrets tight-lipped and ensconced. Pacing the eerie grounds, White's mind raced from theory to theory, like a child skipping stones across a pond. Each stone represented another possibility. They could have left for a more bountiful shore, lured away by the tantalizing whisper of fertile land and the promise of prosperity. Yet they could just as easily have fallen victim to violence or tragedy, the blood-stained remnants of a savage skirmish hidden among the foliage. It was a tragic irony that he, the leader, felt lost among the very people he was meant to protect now. He was the lone sheriff in a ghost town with no evidence of crime. He chuckled darkly at the absurdity of it all. After all this time and exploration, he had returned to find, well, nothing. A complete zero in the math of colonization. As dusk began to shroud the island in eerie tones of twilight, the air grew thick with tension and uncertainty. Bugs buzzed with the excitement of a Saturday night rave, performing a cacophonous symphony among the tall grass. The island, once a vibrant community filled with hopeful hearts, now exuded an ethereal stillness that gnawed at his resolve. The creeping doubt invaded White's mind as he imagined gruesome scenarios. Perhaps the colonists had succumbed to illness, or worse, had they mingled with the natives, only to end up like a scene from an unfortunate B-movie. Breastplates clashing, arrows flying, and chaos reigning. The reality of his comrade's fate felt like a specter, looming ever closer, palpable and daunting, while he stood frozen, angry at himself for not seeing the storm clouds overhead before the first drops started falling. As night enveloped him, John White clutched the word Croatoan like a lifebuoy in a sea of confusion. There was something profoundly bittersweet about the mysteries the world presented, like a magnificent novel that dangles the plot twist just out of reach. Would he ever uncover the truth? Would he dash back to England with tales of adventure that culminated in nothing more than horrified bewilderment? With a resigned sigh that echoed in the silence, he turned to face the dark woods beneath the gnarled branches, knowing full well that the real story might never be told, forever relegated to the whispers of the wind and the sighs of the night. Picture this: a sweltering summer day in 1587, where the air is thick with the scent of salt and the distant cries of seabirds. A motley crew of colonists, brimming with dreams of prosperity, strides into what they hope will be a new beginning in the New World. But about 3 years later, when John White finally returns from England with supplies and maybe a few souvenirs, he finds only emptiness, like a ghost town left behind after a particularly rowdy party. It's enough to make anyone feel a chill, as if the whispers of the Roanoke colony echo through the trees, saying, "Come join us, if you dare." The legend begins, as curious minds spark theories, some as wild as a fever dream after eating too many bad oysters at a beach picnic. Was it the native tribes, those mighty warriors of the land, armed with bows and arrows sharper than a sarcastic remark at a family dinner, had every reason to invite, or maybe forcibly include the colonists in their world. The idea that the colonists might have assimilated into local tribes is a tantalizing theory. Imagine a British gentleman trading his ruffled collar for a leather tunic, dancing around a bonfire while sharing tales of his previous vegetable garden endeavors. Yet one can't help but humorously wonder, how many evenings does one spend around a fire before someone starts craving a nice cup of tea? Perhaps the colonists just wanted to spice things up a bit. Or maybe they finally discovered that nature had better snacks than hardtack. Then there's the riveting possibility of famine, a drama set against a backdrop of wilting crops and the despairing cries of hungry bellies. If you've ever been hangry, you know how a lack of food can send otherwise rational humans running for the hills, or in this case, right into the arms of their Aboriginal neighbors. The land, wild and beautiful, offered nothing more than dense bark and bitter roots. Listening to the colonists' stomachs grumbling from miles away would have been louder than a rock concert without any of the fun. The haunting calls of starvation may have prompted dire decisions, turning survival into a question more perplexing than any reality TV show twist. As we thrum through the ages, Roanoke grows into a myth that rivals the legends of King Arthur, or perhaps the never-ending saga of how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. Each generation spins their own thread into the grand tapestry of what could have happened. Ghost hunters trek to the site. Locals spin tales like they're casting fishing nets, and historians sift through old logs like detectives on a sitcom. The whispers of the colony's loss become a siren song that draws in every curious kid and armchair explorer, all eager to uncover that elusive missing piece of history. It's amusing to think that perhaps the colonists, if they ever saw a time machine, would be supplying us with more shout-outs than anyone on social media today could imagine. Ultimately, the enigma of Roanoke weaves itself so tightly into the fabric of American folklore that it feels like an old family quilt, frayed edges, wild patterns, and stitched together with wild imaginations. It reminds us that the past is not just about dusty old books and long-forgotten maps. It's alive, flourishing in our storytelling, whether around campfires or on late-night talk shows discussing mysterious disappearances. So, as we ponder the fate of those colonists, let's raise a glass to their legacy, a mystery that mysteriously manages to tantalize and haunt us like an unexpected jump scare in a horror movie. Perhaps one day, a clever space archaeologist will discover the truth. But for now, Roanoke stands as a thrilling riddle, inviting and elusive, like the drizzle of rain on a sunny day, leaving us wondering just what might have happened when the lights went out in the colony.